Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good day. I am Abu Halil A. Ibrahim
And I am Narsida A. Mangwa. And I am Noraida Abu Ibrahim.
and today we are going to discuss the chapter 5 of our lesson in Understanding the Self with the title The Western and Eastern Concept of Self.
So when we say concept of self, it talks about how an individual or how a person conceptualize or understand itself, or how the person understand the self. It talks about the ways on understanding the self. Okay? So I have questions. As a person, what are your own ways on understanding yourself? Do you have any or none? Do you really understand yourself or not yet? Okay, so I want you to think of that question so that we can easily relate ourselves in our topic today, or in the Eastern and Western concept of self. So in this lesson, we will going to know and identify the differences of Western and Eastern when it comes to their way of conceptualizing the self, or when it comes to their way of understanding the self. But before that, let me introduce first the learning outcomes of our lesson. So at the end of this chapter, or at the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain the Western concept of self, enumerate and discuss the different Eastern conceptions of self, compare Eastern and Western views of the self, and examine your own conceptualization of self. So after the discussion of this lesson, we will be able to know if where our concept of self more favorable or nearer. Is it in Eastern or in Western concept of a self? So Eastern versus Western perception will be the main focus of our discussion. We will going to outline the Western and Eastern concepts of a self, and how they differ and how they agree on certain perspective. So as a person, do you also agree that every individual has a different perception of self? Do you agree? Do you agree that every individual has their own way or has their own beliefs on how we truly understand the self? So probably yes, especially when we are in different cultures and in different environment, because our perceptions of self will surely be different too, as it is influenced by our environment. Am I right? Okay. So one of the most common evidences of having that differences, or having our differences in self-perception, is the differences of Eastern and Western perception of a self. Always bear in mind that Eastern represents Asia and Western represents Europe and also the North America, including the UK, Canada, and the USA. So now, without further ado, let's begin to know and to find out the concept of self in Western. So, in Western thoughts, they conducted scientific investigations in the effort to understand the self. So, scientific investigation is their basis in understanding the self. And so they develop theories and difference among them. That is how the way or approach of Western people in understanding the self. What else? In the Western thought, they emphasize the importance of scientific investigations or scientific methods of investigations to provide satisfactory answers to understanding the self. So like what I have said earlier, the Western is very scientific in understanding the self. They use a scientific approach because in a scientific approach, we all know that it involves forming and testing a hypothesis. So, when we use a scientific method, there are certain procedures or steps to follow. There are certain steps to follow. And once you use a scientific method, you can remove the subjectivity or you can remove being biased, since scientific method requires each answer to be authenticated with objective evidence. So that is how the Western is. They want an authentic evidence to prove something about the self. And what else? The Western culture is what we would call an individualistic culture, since their focus is on the person. So the emphasis is individualistic rather than relational. So what do we mean by that? With the Western thought, their focus is on individuals only. How you understand yourself only. On the other hand, in Eastern thoughts is relational or the relationship of an individual with other people. You are not alone. You are not only the focus. So how you build the concept of yourself in relation to other people. Okay? So basically, our relationship with others and to the society. That's how the Eastern and Western difference in concept of self. But for now, we will not go deeper on the discussion of Eastern thought because we will focus first on the concept of Western when it comes to understanding the self. So let's take a look first on the perspective of the West in conceptualizing the self. So, even as early as time of the philosophers, there is a heavy emphasis on the individualistics or the separateness of the self. Okay? So, ancient Greek philosophers see humans as bearers of irreplaceable values. And Saint Thomas Aquinas believed that the body constitutes individuality or being separate from one another. So, what makes you a separate being is the fact that you have your own body. And Westerners are more likely to emphasize separateness. That even though you are connected to others, you should maintain individuality. You should maintain responsibility, choices, and even the freedom. Okay? And another thing is the quote of René Descartes. It quotes the I think, therefore I am. So basically, in the Western understanding of the self, there is a heavy emphasis on your recognition that you are a separate entity. That even though you are belong to a certain group of people, what's important for you or what's important for them is for you to realize that you have your own identity. Even though you came from a certain family or you came from a certain culture, you have the capacity to make a choices. Hence, what's important is for you to become a unique person. That may not be the case in the Eastern concept of the self. Okay? So, to understand more the Western concept of self, let's take a look first on the 4 categories. So, the psychiatrist and Professor Frank Johnson outlined 4 categories on how the term self is used. How the term self is used in Western contemporary traditions. So now, let's take a look at on the Frank Johnson's 4 categories of the self, in which the Western concept of self is holistically defined. So first is the Western analysis, or first is the Western as analytic. Johnson believes that the self is defined as an aggregator of parts or a combination of parts, but at the same time, the self must be viewed as an example entity or as an object separate from the environment and from other people. So in other words, the Western as analytic is about me versus the other. Okay? So even though you are a child, you can play with your toys. even though you can interact with your parents, the emphasis is that you should know that you are in separate being. Okay? So the next is the Western self as monotheistic. According to Johnson, one of our tendencies in understanding the self is that we believe that the self is the model after a unitary omnipotent power. In other words, we believe that man was created by God in his image. Okay? The next is Western self as individualistic. Just like what I have been talking about since earlier, the Western thinking, the self-expression and self-actualization are important ways of establishing who one is. So, if you are from the West, there is a heavy emphasis on being the person you are meant to be. Okay? So, what's important is for you to pursue your goals and not really to do what your parents telling you to do. Of course, both approaches have pros and cons. I'm just highlighting the focus in their culture, okay? And the last is the Western self as materialistic and rationalistic, believing that people are rational, capable of analytic, deductive models of thinking. So, the individual is rational. He or she can decide for himself or for herself. No one is dictating you from what you should do. And if you have the power to decide on your own, then you have to take the responsibility over your own behavior. David Hu, in 1995, American researcher, also describes the Western self as an individualistic self that is deeply aware of itself, its uniqueness, sense of direction, purpose, and volition. So, David Hu characterized Western self as an individualistic self that is deeply conscious of its self, including its uniqueness, motivation, and free will. David Hu also said that the self is located at the center within the individual through which the world is perceived. The self is also seen as an entity distinct from other selves and all other entities. So it implies that the self belongs to the individual and to no other. And as a consequence of being a complete owner of a self, everyone should take the responsibility over their own behavior. Frank Johnson in 1985 traces the earliest historical roots of the Western concept of the self. to works on philosophy almost a half million years ago. So according to the historical development of Western concept of self, we have three stages of development. As accordingly, the period of pre-Christian times until 1850 is marked as the first stage of development of Western. Marked as the first stage of development of Western concept of a self. It was the period where the philosophical and theoretical attempts for characterizing and for conceptualizing the self was appearing. And in stage 2, that was during 1850 to 1940, the experimental psychology came into prominence and put forth the concept of self within the social interactionist framework. And the period 1940 to the present is marked as the third stage. In this stage, the growth of sociology, anthropology, and psychology saw the emergence of various concepts of self, including the Western concept. So, from the period of 1940 up to the present, the concept of a self becomes multidimensional, and it continues to develop. At this stage, the sociological and psychological theories of self encompass all three levels of self, namely inner self, interpersonal self, and social self. So that is how the concept of Western self developed up to the present. So now we will go to the Eastern concept of self.
Okay, so when it comes to the Eastern concept of self, they raise questions about the ultimate meaning of life. They develop theories of self as they have investigated what it means to be a human being. Why are you alive? What is your purpose in life? So that is focused in Eastern thoughts. The ultimate meaning of life. What else? It emphasizes relational rather than individual. The self is considered not in isolation but in relations to others, society, and the universe. So this is what we have said earlier. When it comes to Western, it is individualistic, while in Eastern, it's more on relational or your relation to other people. So here, you are not only looking on yourself as an individual only, or as yourself only, but rather you look into relationships. Okay? The Eastern theories are highly practical. They offer a variety of techniques for cultivating a deeper understanding of the self. And last but not the least, they do not utilize the scientific technique of investigation. So, They do not use a scientific method. The next one, we have here a closer look the different Eastern thoughts or to a different concept of self and the Eastern. Okay, so here we will focus on the four religions. Why religion? Because in Eastern thoughts, their concept in understanding the self are usually related to religions. In this part, we will discuss four religions in Eastern Hemisphere. Okay, so we have Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism, and Taoism. So let's begin with Buddhism. Buddhism comes from the root word Bud, mean awake. Okay, so what does awake mean? When we say awake, you are awake, of course. What does these words awake imply? Okay, it implies that when the eyes are open, it would lead to understanding more the self and the world. So here, in order to understand more yourself, it is important that you are awake. Okay? Your eyes must be open. Now, the question is, who is the founder of Buddhism? Who is started this Buddhism religion? So, the founder of this Buddhism religion was Siddhartha Gautama, known as Buddha. So, Siddhartha Gautama is the founder of Buddhism. And according to the teaching of Buddhism, all people have seen of enlightenment. Okay, I repeat. All people have seen of enlightenment. What does it mean? It simply means that all people have potential to be to be a Buddha. However, the seed should be nurtured, or these seeds of enlightenment should be cared. That is the beliefs of Buddhism. So under Buddhism, they believe that man is just a title for the summation of the five parts that compose the individual. So what is the five parts? We have matter, sensation, perception, mental constructs, and consciousness. But what if those five are incomplete? What if you only have 4, 3, or 2? If that's the case, then it does not make a man. That is the belief of Buddhism. If that 5 are not complete, then it does not make a man. Okay? Additional information, in Buddhism, they believe that there is no self or soul. So, in Buddhism, they also believe that there is nothing and all else is an illusion. So, they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also believe that nothing is permanent but change. So they also beli Okay? In Buddhism, they believe that the world is ever changing. Everything is changing. Okay? And I know that you are also familiar in the passage that there is nothing permanent in this world except change. Um, okay, so that is the belief of Buddhism. And under Buddhism, they have this term anicca. What does anicca means? Okay, anicca means impermanence. Okay, it means that everything in life is always changing, that nothing lasts forever. Wow, okay? So, there is no forever. That is the belief of Buddhism. Okay? We have to keep in mind that in the belief of Buddhism, you should recognize, you should acknowledge the anicca, or this what we call impermanence. Okay? Because when you do not acknowledge, or when you did not recognize this, everything may lead to an illusion of selfhood. So, when you did not acknowledge the concept of impermanence, you may have an illusion that there is self, like what we had said earlier. Buddhism believes that there is no self. Okay? The idea is to experience nirvana, a state of transcendence, devoid of self-reference. So it means the under nirvana you do not have a concept of the self, because they believe in the concept that there is no self. Okay? So according to Buddhism, nirvana is the state in which her mind is incomplete of peace. So maybe you are confused on what this nirvana really means. So actually, we can compare nirvana as a heaven. So nirvana is a perfect place of peace and happiness, like heaven. So it is their concept of heaven. Okay? So when will you reach this nirvana?
So, nirvana reaches when the person's sufferings all go away and they need nor want nothing. And how does a nirvana can achieve? This nirvana, a state of transcendence, can be achieved through meditation. Okay, so you can also achieve it through meditation. You can also achieve nirvana through meditation. So if in Western we have the concert of a soul searching, in Eastern they have the meditation. You can achieve nirvana or their heaven through meditation. Okay?
So, if you want to achieve nirvana, you have to go through meditation, wherein the material world is nothing. Okay, you only focus on that transcendence state. Okay, how can we say that we already reached the nirvana? Like what I have said earlier, according to the beliefs of Buddhism, it is reached when the person's desires and suffering all go away and they need nor want nothing. Okay, moving on to the second religion. We have Hinduism. Okay, so where these Hinduism religions came from? The Hinduism is a religion of ancient people known as the Aryans. Okay, so Hinduism came from the country of India. So how about the Buddhism? It is also came from the India. Okay, so the law of karma is the most important doctrine of Hinduism. So I know that you are already familiar with this karma. Do you believe in karma? So that is the most important doctrine of Hinduism, the karma. So they believe that all actions really do a good or a bad outcome in one life. Okay? In Hinduism, they believe that there is a good karma and a bad karma. So Hindu believe that Atman, being immortal, continues to be reincarnate from lifetime to lifetime until it is freed from the cycle of rebirth and reach a stage of nirvana or non-birth. So, what is that Atman means? So, that Atman means a soul or a spirit. Okay? So, they believe that the spirit or the soul is immortal. Okay? It continues to be reincarnated from lifetime to lifetime. It is free from the cycle of rebirth and reach a state of nirvana or non-birth, because the Hindu believes on the idea of reincarnation, and that reincarnation is unending. What does reincarnation mean? So, when we say reincarnation, you are reborn in another body, because they believe on the concept of reincarnation. Karma does not end with the body's death. Its influence may extend through reincarnation of the soul. So it means that the concept of karma in Hinduism does not end when the person died. It is still continue after you reincarnated. It only ends when you already reach the nirvana or their concept of heaven. Okay? So, next one, we have Confucianism. It is a philosophy and a belief system from ancient China. Actually, the Confucianism regarded as social and ethical philosophy rather than religion. So, where this Confucianism originated? So, Confucianism was originated from China, and the founder of Confucianism is Confucius. So, core Confucian thought is the golden rule of the principle of reciprocity, which is do not do to others what you would not want others to do to you. So I know that you are already familiar with this golden rule. Okay, another important feature in Confucianism thought is the individual's greatest mission of attaining self-realization, wherein cultivation is instrumental. So, if you want self-realization, or if you want to understand yourself, it is important that you cultivate yourself first. Okay, how? Self-cultivation could be accomplished by knowing one's role in society. Society act accordingly. As you recall, I told you a while ago, the Eastern thought is not individualistic. It is focused on a relationship of an individual to other people and the society. And here we can see that concept of Confucianism. To achieve a self-realization, you need first the self-cultivation, and you can only achieve self-cultivation when you already recognize your role in society. Okay, so next one, based on Confucian thoughts, moral character is perfected through continuously taking every opportunity to improve oneself in thought and actions. According to the teaching of Confucianism, you should put your thoughts into action, not just in a word. Okay? And for the last religion, we have Taoism.
So, Taoism is an ancient tradition of philosophy and religious belief attributed to Lao Tzu. Okay, so where the Taoism came from? Taoism is still came from China. So basically, the four allegiance that we have discussed is just revolving in India and also the China. Okay, so who is the founder of Taoism? So it was Lao Tzu. Okay, so Taoism believes that the self is an extension of the cosmos and not of the social relationships. So they believe that the self is an extension of the cosmos. So if you observe in Confucianism, its focus is your relationship and your status in the society. While in Taoism, their focus is not a social relationship, but rather your relationship in the universe, or the what we call cosmos. Another one, Taoism describes the self as one of the limitless forms of the Tao. So, what is the Tao? So, Tao is commonly recorded as nature. That is the nature that is the foundation of all that exists. So that is the belief of the people that practicing the Taoism religion. Another one, the perfect man has no self, and the selfless person leads to a balanced life in harmony with nature. There should be unity and harmony among opposing elements, the yin and yang. Okay, so generally speaking, that yin is characterized as an inward energy that is feminine, still dark and negative. On the other hand, yang is characterized as outward energy, masculine, hard bright, and positive. Okay? So, Taoism believes that the simplicity, spontaneity, and harmony when nature should govern oneself. Therefore, there should be unity and harmony among opposing elements, the yin and yang. So, the balance of yin and yang is important. If yin is stronger, yang will be weaker. If yang is stronger, yin will be weaker. Okay? So, they are just vice versa. So, the target in Taoism is to have a balanced life. Target of Taoism is to have a balanced life of both good and bad. But we should be one with nature. We should not only focus on the material things around us. Okay?
So moving on, the models and approaches of understanding the self, showing the difference of Eastern and Western concept of self. First, in terms of frame reference of Western thoughts, its separation between philosophy and religion or spirituality, while in Eastern thoughts, religion and philosophy are intertwined. So as we observe, when we talk and Eastern thoughts, our discussion is religion, because in Eastern thoughts you cannot separate that religion and philosophy, while in Western thoughts that religion and philosophy are separated each other. So next we have this difference in terms of this school of thoughts and belief system.
In Western thoughts, we have scholasticism, rationalism, empiricism, and phenomenology. On the other hand,
in Eastern thoughts, we have Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. In terms of source of knowledge, Western thoughts have use of reason rather than faith to pursue wisdom. Why? Because they use scientific methods, they use reason, observations, analysis, very scientific. While in Eastern thoughts, they use intuition and is often associated with religious belief. So it means that is based on faith. Okay, so who are the notable philosophers under the Western thoughts? Okay, so we have Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Rene Descartes, and John Locke. Well, in Eastern thoughts, we have Siddhartha Gautama, also known as Buddha. Confucius, and Lao Tzu. So in terms of moods of cognition, the Western thoughts are very analytic and deductive. They are very rational and scientific. While in Eastern thoughts, it is a very synthetic and inductive. And in terms of emphasis, the Western focus on distinctions and opposition.
this means that the target under the Western thoughts is the differentiate you among others.
How you become a unique person, how you become yourself, and how you become different with other people. But when we talk about the Eastern thoughts, its focus is in harmony with other people, in harmony with society, and in harmony with the universe or the cosmos. That is their focus in Western thoughts on views of self.
And in Western thoughts on views of self is egocentric, because they just focusing on Me, me and I. Its focus is always yourself as an individual. But in Eastern thought is socio-centric. Again, usually it talks about in harmony, doing good for other people, finding that balance between the good and evil, in harmony with environment or with the nature. So that is the focus of Eastern thoughts, and when it comes to the views of the universe and life, Western are very linear. What does linear mean? So linear here implies that you born, then you die. You have the beginning and you have the end, just like the line.
But when it comes to Eastern thoughts, very circular, okay? So why circular? Because Eastern believe in afterlife. They believe in incarnation or reincarnation. They believe that when you die, you will be alive again. So it is unending, okay?
So, in terms of a theological view of Western thought, it is very monotheistic. Mono means only one God, only one supreme being, like that. While in Eastern thought, it is polytheistic or pluralistic, because more than one. Their supreme being is more than one. And in terms of ideal, Western thoughts is self-actualization through personal growth. Okay, so it is still in relation with our discussion a while ago, that in order for you to develop, you need to improve yourself, and you can only do that if you focus on yourselves. So very individualistic. Well, in Eastern thoughts, if you want to balance your life, you need to find your role in a society. So if you want to improve yourself, if you want to find yourself, you have to know your role in the society.
And the last, in terms of cultural framework, Western thoughts is very individualistic. They focus on the individualism compared to collectivism of Eastern thoughts, because under in Western thoughts, they believe that the self is the distinct and autonomous entity, and self is independent with the universe and the society. But on the other hand, in Eastern thoughts, we are just part of the society, and we are just one part of society. We are just one part of universe. What else?
Under Western thoughts, personal success is important because of being individualistic. That in the Eastern thoughts, the important is your duty towards all others. How can you help in other people? That's why individualism versus collectivism.
Okay, So that's all. We hope that you learn from our report. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.